Shalom, shalom. I hope you're all doing well. It's a very gray, gloomy day here. That's why those living room lights are on. That's why the lighting situation is a little strange. But you know what? What better day than just to sit down and just listen to myself ramble like a crazy person and record myself and share it as an excuse to just listen to the voices in my head. But I think this is going to be a very enjoyable topic and one that has a lot to explore. Harriet Brown is a writer. That is her trade. That is what she studied. That I looked at her LinkedIn. That's kind of what she's done all of her life. She is currently a professor of journalism at the University of Syracuse. And of course, she is also a mother. And she had a brief moment of notoriety for her 2010 memoir, Brave Girl Eating, about helping her daughter recover from very serious anorexia. This book still gets brought up in a lot of circles in the recovery community for eating disorders. It generally has very favorable reviews. I wonder if the book had some more notoriety, would it still have those favorable reviews, but we can ponder on that later. But I will say that I have never seen such a case of some parent who really, really, truly believes they did what they could, and yet the cognitive dissonance, ooh, a big fancy word there, in the writing just shows that they really have missed the mark. It's like playing baseball, you know, the American sport for people watching overseas, and missing and being like, and then the player going, I scored a home run, and starts taking off to the other bases. And then the coaches or referees or whatever it's called, or being like, hey, no, get back to it. But that person's like, no, home run, I knocked it out of the ballpark. Look, the ball, you can't see the ball because I knocked it out, so it's soaring, that kind of thing. Delusion. Delulu is not the Salulu. Denial is a river in Egypt. Some other soundbite word from TikTok, I don't know. But I also want to quickly just pose like a little conversation piece here. Because when these cases come up, people might ask, hey, like, how does this happen? How can somebody who claims to have studied, who claims to have really immersed themselves and really put all this effort and like have no progress in helping with, well, what they claim to be helping, and in some cases made it worse? Well, it got me thinking about, you know, there's a scandal on TikTok like every 4 seconds, but a recent one that had its moment was the 17 diapers mom, Hannah Hyatt. How she was a nurse, and yet her medical denialism was scary. You know, she's like, oh, I'm a nurse. I don't need to go check out for pregnancy until right before delivery. I don't wash up. I don't change diapers, blah, blah, blah. They're like, you're a nurse, you know that bacteria, you should know better. And then, of course, the alleged abuse of her child. She, as a nurse, would be trained in spotting child abuse and reporting it to CPS, so she knows what the signs are, and yet she perpetuates and instills those symptoms in her kids, whichever way. And, well, not that I agree with it, but in a weird way, I do think, in some cases, being a nurse, being in the medical profession, claiming to study something so hard and actually having studied it only then to like completely turn your back on it, it makes sense in some weird way. For people in the medical profession, whether that's psychology or just a doctor or a nurse, it's a very challenging profession. It's a profession that challenges your morals constantly, because you're going to see things that really defy the odds and really are in very gray areas of morality and what's right and wrong. I think a lot of it in like assisted suicide, that kind of thing, for terminally ill people, that kind of debate. Of course, there's the abortion debate as of now. So in a way, I can kind of see why Nurse Hannah got the view she did, because she probably saw some cases of people, some miracle cases in the hospital she worked at defying the odds of medical science. And she's like, well, you know what? Those people are fine, so my kids will probably find something to work as hard in parenting, basically. Well, yes, general science says this, but I've seen a few cases like this, or I've seen a few cases where the doctors had to make some very scary decisions that weren't objectively the best. Then I'm not so bad. Then so can I make decisions that don't seem to be good, but overall I think are, based on other circumstances that aren't common, whatever. I've seen actually a few people in the medical profession be like this. I'll actually give a really interesting example, like a little story here. At 17, I had a surgery where a really, really big surgery. It was basically torn up, hacked up, rearranged inside, and put back together like Humpty Dumpty, pretty much. Nothing like serious happened. It wasn't an accident. But so I had the surgery. It's intense. I wake up from surgery and I'm like knocked down on every possible pain medication possible. Oxys, morphines, whatever, all that opioid stuff that gets people addicted. A 17-year-old is pumped into me like addicts dream would be, because they need it really badly. And the doctor was like, okay, well, it's serious, so he's probably going to be like lying still, like paralyzed in the hospital bed for a week. And after 3 days, I make enough recovery progress that I am capable of walking for a short period of time, very slowly, while desperately holding on to my IVF drip bag thing, or not IVF, whatever, the painkiller bag, or whatever was in there. This was a long time ago. And all the people on the operating floor were like, wow, they've not seen that before. They're like, oh my God, look at him. You know, like Iron Man, cue that Eye of the Tiger song. And then another boy, also 17, so my demographic, had the same surgery the same day I did. And they went to him and they're like, hey, there's another kid. He's able to get up and walk. Let's see you try to do it. Come on. No, he was out. That wasn't happening. So just shows how very much people are different, bodies are different, psychologically people handle things very differently. And I think someone like Hannah and a lot of people like, you know, that get villainized are like, well, I've seen things happen differently in real time than what mainstream society says, so, you know, I know better, basically, that kind of thing. It's sad, but it's true. I mean, I'm not excusing Nurse Hannah, 17 diapers, mom, whatever, Hannah, whatever, or all that. I just think it's interesting. And I do think that there are many small circumstances that happen daily that warp people's sense of reality, and that they're living in a different one, even though they've been doing the same things you and I have been doing all the time. So I'll go into, with Harriet, why I think her reality got so warped. Let's actually go into the book. The book is about, again, her daughter, Kitty. I don't know if that's a real name or just a cover name, and the recovery. And right off the bat, the book really concerned me. So she starts the book just kind of like diving right into it. Like around 14, Kitty really started to develop some very strange symptoms. From the get-go, what really made me concerned is how Harriet worked so hard to emphasize her daughter was like the good girl, like the Mary Sue kind of. So there's a lot of compliments following Kitty when Harriet starts her book and talks about Kitty's development of symptoms. Okay. And you know, it's nice to shade good qualities about your daughter, or it should be, but then it like very quickly gets very excessive, where it almost feels like Harriet's desperately trying to convince the reader, like, oh no, my daughter is not like other girls, hashtag not like other girls. She's the good girl. She was so good in school. She really cared about her parents, blah, blah, blah. Oh no. And this gets me like, no, believe me. No, really believe me. No, really believe me. Which started to really worry me, and I'll share some passages about that later. So Kitty was very good student. She was a very high achiever, and she was not super self-conscious about her appearance, but did mind it a lot, did work hard to be as attractive as possible, as appropriate for her age. At 14, Kitty's anorexia really took a turn for the worse. I mean, she started to get very concerned about her weight, and then it plummeted. Her mental state really plummeted. So Harriet then goes and gives a little bit of background into Kitty. It's a very typical suburban American life in upstate New York. Harriet did remember Kitty having some kind of body image issues around age 11, that she was gaining a little weight, not a lot. And Kitty was worried about that, and she got very triggered by Health Week at school, about health class and learning about that. Though, to me, right off the bat, it seemed like Harriet was just blaming the school standard science curriculum on health and fitness for Kitty's sudden self-consciousness about a few extra pounds. It seemed like she was very quick to jump to that conclusion for reasons that are never really explained. Kitty said she wanted to lose a few pounds, and her mother was supportive of it. And then Harriet says, you know, she herself as a teenager was insecure with her body a lot as well. So she felt she could relate to Kitty at that point in her preteen years. Kitty's early years from middle school to 14, when she starts developing a serious eating disorder, Harriet just jumps around in the timeline a lot, so I'm not sure exactly what happened when. At some point, Kitty confesses to having very serious OCD, which Harriet's reaction to that is not really delved into much. And Kitty's just emotional state just gets really bad before there are obvious signs of anorexia. And again, what could have triggered that, Harriet doesn't go into. It's just shocking to me. Harriet is a journalist and a veteran writer, and yet what are the circumstances of which certain things occur in, she just doesn't say. Like, up until Kitty's weight starts to decrease drastically, everything beforehand is very vague and very cloudy. For a while, I just got the impression that Harriet had this there's nothing I can do. I tried asking her what's wrong, but she doesn't tell me, so I stopped there. I kept waiting for her to fall apart, for her hunger and malnutrition to catch up with her, but Kitty kept up her demanding schedule, gymnastics practice 4 nights a week, and days spent working at a gymnastics day camp. Her functioning confused me. How bad could things be really if she was able to manage all that? Maybe I thought Kitty didn't need as much food as other people. Looking back, I recognized that it wasn't just Kitty who was under the sway of an eating disorder. Jamie and I were too. Our thinking was also distorted by fear and anxiety, confusion, hope. That's one of the strangest things about eating disorders. They affect not just the person who has them, but everyone around that person too. They're so insidious and so counterintuitive that the brain just can't make sense of them. Like the visual phenomenon called edge induction, where the brain fills in visual gaps in a scene or landscape that's poorly lit or hard to interpret. On some level, we see what we expect to see or what we want to see. Part of me gets what she's saying a little bit, because if your daughter's starting to look bad and you want to be in denial about it, because of course you want to think the best of your kid, I think all parents go through a point of like, there's nothing wrong. Okay, it's not that much weight loss. It's fine. She'll get it back quickly. It's just stress of whatever. But again, there's so much other things that happened. Again, she knew there was a record of increasing body dysmorphia for years at that point. She knew Kitty had a bad emotional state, and then also gymnastics camp and doing gymnastics, which doesn't connect the dots that also could be a contributing cause or a major trigger as well. So again, that passage to me just reads, well, there was nothing I could have done. Well, it was this brain fog, mass delusion that my daughter caused me, basically. And Harriet at points does admit that she was in denial of these issues with her daughter. And I don't fault her for that, because again, I think that's common for parents. But just from what she wrote, I get the feeling her denial was a lot worse than what actually she depicted it as. I tell them that our family is not dysfunctional, that we are reasonably happy, that Kitty has never been abused. Actually, I don't tell them that. I want them to believe it, but I see that they don't. I watch their young, transparent faces as they make noises in Kitty's chart. Notes I am not allowed to read, but that no doubt say things like mother in denial. I don't care. I'll accept any judgment they want to offer if they will make my daughter well. I don't get it yet. I still think someone can make my daughter well, that this is a process that will take days, and that there's some incantation that will reverse the damage, turn back the clock, remove the curse, and like Sleeping Beauty, Kitty will open her eyes and magically be healed. Again, that reads to me more of someone who is afraid of being blamed by a therapist than someone who really is interested about the root cause. And again, I said before how Harriet worked so hard to browbeat that, oh, Kitty's not like other girls. She was the good one. She's not the kind that you would think would get anorexia, because she's not like those disgusting girls. Ew, oh God. And that defensiveness to me gets so disgusting. Besides, the other kids here are really messed up. Kitty's not like that. But isn't she? Isn't she in some profound way like other teenagers with their disoriented eyes and odd behaviors? Yes and no. Eating disorders affect a person's thinking and cognitive abilities, but only around certain subjects. And again, I think we've heard this kind from a lot of narcissistic parents, especially when they are writing books like The Other Doormat Mom. Maybe I'm in denial, but our family doesn't seem particularly pathological. We've got our issues like all families. I've had panic disorder since I was a child, which I managed through therapy and medication. Jamie grew up in an alcoholic family where emotional self-expression was not encouraged. We bicker sometimes. We're grumpy sometimes. We're far from perfect. Still, I don't recognize us or Kitty in literature. Each time I read another chapter, another article, I feel worse, not better. Reading has become another exercise in self-flagellation, and I don't need any more of that. Thank you very much. Ew. All you people writing books about families that cause eating disorders. You don't know us. Oh, come on. Okay, we're perfect, but I mean, it's not like we're like what you're describing it, you psychologists. Ew. And again, Harriet doesn't give much insight into what the home life is like with her and her husband running a household and their little, suburban family life. But the glimpse I got into it, I don't like. I strongly suspect they were parents that yelled a lot and were very, very militant and very walking on eggshells. In some ways, our lives now feel similar to those early parenting days. Jamie and I divide and conquer, one of us taking Kitty with the other handling Emma, which means we rarely have time or energy for a sustained adult conversation. We both have the same sense of heightened experience, trauma waiting around every corner, the same sense of helplessness and ignorance. So they're comparing how Kitty is at 14 to how they felt as being young parents. One, why was one parent responsible for one and the other parent responsible for the other? Emma's the younger sister. Why? And I get being new parents is very scary, and of course, but sense of helplessness and ignorance, what does that mean? That's what they were. I mean, that would tell me her daughter's probably had some serious anxiety issues for the young age. And again, what I mean by no self-reflection, it's like Harriet doesn't know what she's writing, but in a lot of narcissist writing, they just kind of purge out a lot of their thoughts without actually listening to them or connecting one thought to the other. Because, well, you wonder, okay, there's no identifiable cause you can find in the home of Kitty having an eating disorder or what it could be, and yet Harriet does admit that this thing kind of runs in the family. I, on the other hand, grew up in a household obsessed with food and weight. I went on my first diet at 15, the first of many where I would lose, then gain back the same 25 or 30 pounds. Maybe Kitty's fear of fat is really a fear of being like me. Maybe if I were thinner, she wouldn't have to be so thin. Oh, maybe Kitty is afraid of getting fatter because she thinks I'm fat because I think I'm fat. Oh my God. And that shows Harriet's still got a lot of issues herself regarding weight that she herself is not even addressing. I mean, Harriet is very inconsistent. She's inconsistent with a lot of things. Because she says, oh, in my childhood, I had issues with weight, but in my childhood, my generation, we didn't know really that much about health and nutrition. And we just kind of ate whatever was available. But then she also later on admits that her mom was a big weight shamer and food was a very scratchy subject in her home. Another thing she's inconsistent because when talking about the meals she gave her daughters, she was like, first she's like, oh, I was very careful about food. When my daughters were young, I would make their birthday cakes from scratch. But then later on, she's like, I kind of just threw together meals whenever because I don't know how to cook. So again, this is all about eating disorders. These details not adding up are strange. And again, Harriet kind of making a very lackadaisical effort to actually understand her daughter is evident because, again, it seems to be the case that if Harriet reads something that she doesn't like or doesn't agree with or that doesn't fit in with what she wishes the cause was, then she just dismisses it. The week after Kitty comes home from the ICU, I buy every book I can about the anorexia, mostly first-person accounts. I read only a few pages of each before stuffing them back into the back of my closet. Despite the bright covers, the implied triumphs, the book radiates despair, or maybe that's what I'm seeing now because of Kitty. The young woman, and they're all written by women, are dealing with so much more than anorexia, abusive or neglectful grown-ups, hostile peers, drugs, alcohol, cutting, thoughts of suicide. So, well, one, she kind of just was very petty saying all written by women. Why is that detail necessary? You are a woman and your daughter's a woman. So a book's written by women, I would think would be more relatable in that situation. Of course, men can offer good advice and insights as well. Also, it's a very condescending tone. She's like, ugh. I mean, how can these books, accounts of anorexia, just don't apply because all these girls had issues like drugs, alcohol, cutting, thoughts of suicide, hostile peers. And, oh God, no way my daughter could possibly have faced any of that. I mean, your daughter goes to school. Is she getting bullied? I would count that as hostile peers. Are there drugs? Did she take drugs and you didn't know about it? Was she self-harmed? Did she have a self-harming problem? You mentioned her mental state was declining before the anorexia, so was there thoughts of self-harm or suicide? No idea. It's like, oh God, we never could possibly have that. And oh God, these gross people who have that are the reason they have anorexia, so it doesn't apply. It's really, I like really hate that tone. I think it's really nasty. And by the way, you're a woman writing a first-person account about anorexia, just like these people you dismiss. So your own book doesn't fit into the kind of thing you wanted to read from other people. Again, I've already touched upon this before. I just cannot help, I can't stop talking about this. She's so insistent Kitty is not like other girls. Kitty's not like the teens we saw at the psychiatric hospital, and she's not like the authors of those books. She wasn't troubled or oppositional or defiant as a child. She doesn't smoke or drink or cut herself. The examples you gave in the previous passage from those books, oppositional and defiant wasn't something you specifically said, unless you're associating self-harm, thoughts of suicide, drugs as being oppositional or defiant. Because kids can do those things and be very compliant and good still. So you really just think very low of most kids except Kitty, or it seems you're just putting Kitty on a pedestal so you can just dismiss a lot of what could be the potential causes. And again, I hate this very condescending tone. Ugh. God, aren't those kids gross? Those kids going through mental health struggles? Ugh. Harriet, the mother, when it comes to implications of what a mental health diagnosis could mean around her daughter, and just overall teen girls in general, it comes off very rules for thee, not for me. Because she just perpetuated a lot of harmful stereotypes and stigmas to, defiant and oppositional drug-using teenagers who develop eating disorders. But again, she wants none of those potentially applied to her daughter who has an eating disorder, because she does just, it's like, but she doesn't anything like them. And she jumps through these mental gymnastics to make her seem like a saint of mental health, when all she's trying to do is deflect what potentially worse news than what she could handle. A few psychiatric disorders have lost a little of that stigma. For example, people talk more openly now about depression, bipolar disorder. But with a few exceptions, we still don't want to hear about the most severe cases of depression or about the inner lives of people with schizophrenia or personality disorders. Once the label is slapped on you, you enter a world made nightmarish not just by whatever disorder you've got, but by the stress of being marginalized in a society that fears and loathes any hint of mental differences. Classifying eating disorders as mental illness piles even more stigma and judgment onto sufferers. You just piled so much stigma onto teens who resort to drugs or self-harming. Ew, my daughter's not like them. And again, what tipped me off that she comes off as a very narcissistic mother that just wants everything to go her way 24/7 is this passage. That night, Emma's theater camp gives a performance of Midsummer's Night's Dream. Kitty doesn't want to attend, but we insist we're trying to maintain some vestige of normalcy of family life, especially for Emma, who stood with us at her sister's bedside in the ICU, who sits at the dinner table hearing the poisonous words that pour from her sister's mouth, whose life has already been profoundly altered by anorexia. Just before that passage, Kitty was having a bit of a mental breakdown. I think they could have made an exception to not let her go. Why would you make your daughter go when she's not in a good state? I think Emma would have I think a part of Harriet's inner voice was telling her, hey, people could find that disturbing that your daughter had a very severe mental breakdown. You made her go to the sister's performance. So again, there's some pretty twisted logic that again just reveals how very militant and it's my way or the highway, I don't want to listen kind of parent Harriet, I guess her husband Jamie, were. I could turn the car around and take her home, but I know how disappointed Emma would be. And suddenly I'm angry, not enraged, at the idea of upsetting Emma. She's important too, damn it, and I'm not going to let her down. I pull into the parking lot, grab Kitty's hand, and half pull her to the building, where I jam change into the vending machine. Drink this, I say, handing her a 21-ounce bottle of fruit punch. Ugh. That was so scary to read. That was basically force feeding when your daughter was just had a mental breakdown and you say she has to go because I don't want to let my other daughter down. I really don't believe Emma would have cared if her sister came to her freaking performance. I really don't. I'm sorry. We know how siblings are. Again, I hate these perfectionist parenting kind of people because again, it's one of those things where the finishing line can just be moved back, or just perfectionism can just be redefined however way, whenever they feel like it at their whim. But again, Harriet's kind of perfectionism really scares me. I can't call her a Ruby Frank, but I covered Ruby Frank's book recently, and Ruby Frank was like, would get really mean if her daughter Sherry didn't get the piece perfectly. I get the impression that was Harriet also. The show was a success, and Emma, a fairy swathed in bright gauzy scarves, had a moment in the spotlight playing the harp. She'd been taking lessons for 6 months, and it's thrilling to see her absorb the music, and a relief to hear her pull it off without a wrong note. No wrong notes when you just picked up the harp 6 months ago? That's intense. And this isn't even a recital. This is just like a small little bit in a play, and you're relieved she didn't get a note wrong. Oh my God, everything with a sky would have fallen if your younger daughter got a note wrong. Again, your daughter's harp performance was so important, you had to drag your other daughter out of having a mental breakdown, force feed her, and then make her sit through something probably that really bored her. As Kitty progresses into her treatment, Harriet just gets to me like she does everything to cop out of having to address what the problem could be and like why Kitty's like this. And she comes up with her own conspiracy theories, anorexpiracy theories. Suddenly I see how the very human propensity to make order out of chaos, to come to terms with change, to adjust, can inadvertently enable an eating disorder. Katie's been sick for only a few months, but already it's as if I've forgotten who she is without the anorexia. Of course she doesn't want cake. Months from now, Dr. Daniel LaGrange will tell me there's something about anorexia that makes parents and clinicians think it's different ways than they would have. I don't know what it is about the illness that gets us to think it's not such a bad illness. I wonder if our 21st century ambivalence about food is to blame. I can't think of a single woman friend who has never dieted, never deprived herself of food in the name of something bigger than appetite, health, or fashion, or sexual attractiveness. And where do we draw the line between anorexic food restriction and other kinds of restriction? We live in a culture where many of us feel shame over eating anything but grilled chicken, lettuce, and fat-free dressing. A friend once told me she wished she could scrape the taste buds off her tongue so she didn't have to choose between pleasures of eating and being thin. I'm guessing she's not the only one who feels that way. Wow, way to just take something very general and just say, well, that could be my daughter, who knows. This passage made me laugh, actually. This book is not like those despairing memoirs I couldn't read. It's written by a mother of a 14-year-old with anorexia who was dismayed at the treatment options offered. She found another treatment, one I haven't heard of before. I read the whole book sitting on the floor in the library, and by the time I'm done, I have a glimmer of real hope for the first time. So she found a book about anorexia written by someone and she liked it better than the others. Well, I don't know. With all those other books you tried to read, you claimed you didn't get past the first few pages and you didn't even care to finish them. So how can you know what was in those other books that's so different from this magical one that you found that suddenly helps you? I should quickly go into saying this right now. Harriet Brown resorts to what's known as the Maudsley approach. I don't really want to ramble and deep dive into that because that's just a whole other thing. If you Google it, you can't find much criticism on it, but when I learned what it was, I was like, what the hell? Why is this even a valid thing? Basically, it's basically just force feeding. It's basically just permission for parents and anyone else to be militant about eating, basically. But they claim they have like a sympathy label, a sticker over it, because they're like, oh, what we do is while you're eating, family will like touch you and massage you and be like, oh, you're so wonderful, like affirmations, which to me just comes off very incestuous and then an open gate for a lot of assault of the kind, you know what I'm talking about. I doubt it's still in use to this day, but I don't know any recent eating disorder people from coming out of clinics. Can you tell me? It's scary. Well, there is some criticism, but I couldn't find a huge amount. But again, I doubt this is something used to this day. And of course, with Harriet, a psychological, clinical approach of what I say goes, shut up, of course would fit her. And again, when Harriet is trying to work with Kitty through the Maudsley approach, she just has a way of making it all about her. Kitty shakes her head. I'm supposed to be smarter than this, she says. I'm supposed to be able to figure things out without screwing things up. I try another tactic. You've seen me make mistakes, right? She shakes her head. Come on, I say. I screw up all the time. Remember the bread I made without salt? Disgusting. Remember how I used to get lost in the car when we first moved here? I told you we're having adventures, but really I was just trying to find our way home. I'm hoping for at least the hint of a smile. Instead, Kitty frowns. That's different, she said. Why, I asked. Because it's me and not you? She nods slowly. So you think I'm supposed to be better than everyone else in the world? I asked, smiling, so she knows I'm making a joke. Clearly, I'm no comedian because she hears my words as criticism and stalks off. That was cringy. I actually think that even though Harriet was joking, that conversations like that actually happened seriously between her and Kitty. And of course, with narcissistic parenting, there's a lot of deflection. Narcissistic parents will deflect and say the smallest thing caused a catastrophe in the home to avoid them having to take responsibility. So kind of like the butterfly effect. They'll say things like, oh my God, this curtain pulling, the tip of this curtain drawstring was out of place. It's supposed to be here, but it was 2 inches here, and that upset the balance of the whole energy in this room, which made me go crazy, which is why I threw a chair through the window, basically, something like that. And again, I get that sense of deflection from Harriet. I'm not usually defensive about my parenting. I know I make plenty of mistakes, like missing the early signs of anorexia. That was a mistake. I wish, like hell, I'd avoided. And I know other people, including my children, make mistakes. It's part of being human. I think Jamie and I have been giving them the message that we love them the way they are. So why does Kitty hold herself to such an unrealistic, inhuman standard, yet not expect that from other people too? This emotional blind spot feels analogs to her perceptual blind spot about her body. When she looks in the mirror, she sees rolls of fat rather than ribs and hollows. Yet, she sees other people's bodies accurately. Neurologists talk about the interoceptive information data that flows from the body into a part of the brain called insular, things like taste, touch, temperature, and other visceral sensations. The insular helps transform this psychological input into both self-awareness and emotions. For instance, if you eat something that tastes bitter, you might feel disgust or aversion. The chemical stimulus of bitterness becomes the emotional and physical response of disgust in the insula. According to Walter K., anorexia symptoms like distorted body image might be related to glitches in the body's interoceptive system. I like how she snuck in like an insult to Kitty, being like, why does she see herself as needing to lose so much weight, but she doesn't hold other people to the same standards? You're saying your daughter should also be applying this to everyone else, and you want your daughter to fat shame everyone else? You want your daughter to have the same dysmorphia on everyone else? Like, it's just very insulting because it's saying like, can you believe, like she's trying to say, I care about my daughter, look how I'm thinking about her, but also it's very much, can you believe my daughter, just how crazy she is? She's like constantly holding herself to these rigid weight standards, and yet she doesn't have the audacity to do it to other people. Isn't she such a hypocrite? Ugh, what a crazy personality she has. She's so flawed. And then there's just some like passages I just generally think she's just making shit up. By contrast, anorexia nearly always starts with a diet or an inadvertent weight loss from illness or exercise. At some point, probably early in the process of restricting, anorexics are overwhelmed by the effects of malnutrition. Their brains as well as their bodies stop working well. They fall down the rabbit hole and they can't climb back out until they eat. Not just a little bit, but a lot. And not just for a week or two, but for months and months. I genuinely don't know where she got that. Like, I really don't know what the hell is going on there. Of course, Harriet would make up her own thing because what's out there, of course, isn't good enough for her, as you know. And that's when my fury rises. Between our reality, where Kitty's life hangs in the balance, and the theories about why she is sick and how to help her, lies an enormous chasm. I have no idea how to get across it. I don't even know if it's possible, and all the research is no help. It exists only on paper and tidy, two-dimensional, disconnected from the messy, dangerous, three-dimensional world we're trapped in. Every paper I read, every doctor I talked to seems to have a different explanation and approach to anorexia. No wonder the field has such a lousy track record. A higher percentage of people with anorexia die than people with schizophrenia or bipolar disorder or depression or any other mental illness, or those who survive only half truly recover. You claim, oh, all these cold clinical papers don't really explain anything, and yet you dismissed like most of the personal accounts you read. Being like, oh god, my daughter's not horrible like them. And of course she finds a doctor who of course will not dare blame her or point the finger that she could have caused something in her daughter. Like Salvador Minuchin, both Chris Dare and Ivan Eisler are family therapists. They believe from the start that families played a key role in the recovery process. Unlike Minuchin, they didn't assume that families therefore caused eating disorders. On the contrary, Dare and Eisler always had the whole family present, explained McGrange. So there's the kid who has anorexia, but you also see others two who are perfectly healthy. It's not that the parents don't know how to raise their kids and feed them something, they just want to ride with this one. I think I understand what LaGrange is getting at. As I said, she goes on to say, my daughter's not deceptive, oppositional, defiant. But she was with the anorexia, as you admit, so she couldn't be with anything else. My daughter is 14 years old, and this is the first time I know of what she's tried to deceive me. I feel like I'm watching the scene from the great distance as it happens to someone else. Kitty's always been the good girl type, afraid to break the rules or get in trouble. I know she's lied before every kid does, but this feels different. This is a Kitty. She sits down beside me on the beach, folds back the paper, and begins to eat again. She keeps her eyes cast down and her face empty. What is this feeling? Is she angry or embarrassed, frustrated or defiant? She looks like a sleepwalker, blank quiet, driven by some force deep within her. For the first time it occurs to me that my daughter will permanently change by this thing inside her, this twisted creature that shrieks and breathes and spits poison in her blood and bone and mind. And that, in fact, each of us will be changed. Jamie and Emma and I, our family will never be the same, even if Kitty gets well. And this moment that seems a distant possibility, things will never go back to where they were. Like, I've never read something that shames your daughter for having an eating disorder. Like, God, you've changed us forever. Oh my God, what a tragedy you caused. Like, these kids cannot catch a break, can they? And again, there's some moments where Harriet does express some self-awareness that something could have been off in much younger years. But it's like, well, yeah, but is it really worth thinking about? No. From the time Kitty was a toddler, she's been an intensely social person, always wanting play dates, always up for good places and seeing people. She's the kind of person who's re-energized by hanging out with friends. This year, though, she doesn't want to see her friends and she doesn't want to go to school. I know a lot about her anxiety as byproduct of both the anorexia and refeeding process, but I can't help but wonder if on some level she's always felt anxious about school and just never told us. Does the illness give us voice to feelings that have been hidden to her, or does everything get mixed up in its chop and churn? Miss Susan says it's not helpful to get tangled up in this kind of thinking. She says people in recovery from eating disorder do best when they limit the stress they're under, and I believe her. On the other hand, to keep Kitty out of school entirely would create a different level of stress for her. She feels like a failure, a freak, a weirdo, and to be honest, it would be a good for her, all of us, including my relationship with my staff and my boss, who had been immensely patient to have her out of the house for a few hours a day. Wow, so the doctor's like, maybe your daughter shouldn't return to school quite yet. She's like, no. Kitty will feel worse if she doesn't. I know her, but of course, we don't hear from Kitty's perspective.
Hey there, editing me here. Okay, the sound of the leaf blower, which I'm sure bothered you throughout the entire video, got way too loud. You can't hear what I say next. I read 2 different passages of Harriet and Kitty fighting like crazy because Kitty did not want to go back to school yet, and Harriet said, you have to. And Kitty made up a bunch of reasons up that maybe are a little difficult to buy, but Harriet was like, come on, no, go, you gotta go. It was very obvious Harriet didn't really care if going to school would make Kitty better or worse. Harriet just wanted Kitty out of the house so she wouldn't have to deal with her daughter, and she just wanted some relief. But she kept insisting, oh, school will be good for you, when no, I do not believe for a second Harriet believed that, her own reasoning.
That was a lot of cringe I shared with you, like a lot, and there's a little more. Because what's interesting is Harriet Brown, okay, I'll just spoil it. Kitty does recover, but then later on, after the book ends, I find out that she did relapse. I don't know how Kitty's doing now. Because sometime later, Harriet wrote another memoir, not about her daughter. It's called Shadow Daughter, because Harriet was estranged from her family. So yes, this is a very OG old story of family estrangement. And Harriet talks about her narcissist mother. Wow. And, well, it's not really a memoir of Harriet herself. She kind of talks about other cases and interviews other people because she's a journalist. And this is the part we think I'm going to tear apart that book. Actually, the other book she wrote, Shadow Daughter, about family estrangement and a little bit about herself as well, it's really good, actually. I was like, wow, it's very well written. There's some really good passages that, first the gardener is now a plane. Wow, I'm so sorry. You probably can't hear what I'm saying, but I'm not re-recording this. The book was good, I will say. And the shocked because that Brave Girl Eating is just the dumpster of a memoir of just the, I'm a great parent, don't believe it, I'm great. Shadow Daughter was very introspective. Self-reflection skills I didn't think the author was capable of based on her first book. And so, again, it's just so sad to see that she is capable of self-reflection, and she came a long way recovering from her own narcissist mother and estrangement, and yet seems to repeat all the mistakes. But here's the thing, from reading her second book, my theory is that Kitty had golden child syndrome, and that Kitty was pressured to be the perfect child because Harriet was not the perfect child. She was the demon child while her siblings were treated better. So I'll read some passages from Shadow Daughter, and you'll get an idea of Harriet's childhood and kind of why she became who she was. I wonder what a relationship with Kitty is like now. I tried finding anything, I can't. But anyway, so Harriet had a really bad childhood. My sister, and 3 years younger, was the one who hid behind her mother's legs, who clung to her, brought out her maternal instincts. I was the aloof child, the one who was always reading, the one who was worried silently, who wrote poetry and could not sleep. From the start, my mother did not seem to know what to do with me. And again, there are some amazing passages in this book. I was like, oh wow, these are really good. They explain a lot of like the lasting relationships of a toxic dynamic, which helps explain why no matter how toxic the parent-child connection becomes, most people want to and do find ways to maintain it. It survives the ambivalence and exhaustion parents feel when they give up so much sleep, money, time, emotional energy for their children. It survives the necessary tearing away of teenagers trying to separate themselves from the parents who have overseen their lives. I think that's really good. I did learn a lot from this book. So much of what Harriet described as she went with her mother, it's exactly what she describes herself being with her daughter, and yet she doesn't see that. It seems, again, Harriet was very dismissive of anything that could be criticism towards her, and yet she wrote something about this about her own relationship with her mother. Over the years, whenever my mother asked what the problem was between us, why I was so hostile or angry or hurt, a fuzzy blanket would overcome my brain and I would go mute. Once or twice, I would manage to explain that her explosions and lashing out and need to always be right were part of it. I said that when she criticized my weight, my bookishness, my need for time alone, it was as if she wanted to change the very traits and talents that made me myself. What I never said was that I did not trust her and that I couldn't remember ever trusting her. It would have been just one more sign of my deep inadequacy, but it was true. And there's a lot of stories of estrangement of other people she interviewed that were really fascinating and really interesting to read. Wow, I'm like, they were really heartbreaking. And again, this is the passage that told me that Harriet wanted Kitty to be how her mother wished she would have been. We were in a psychological parlance, a bad fit, a mismatched mother-daughter pair. She seemed to resent what she saw as my emotional strength, my confidence in my thoughts and opinions. She seemed to want me to be needier. Maybe she would have done better with a daughter who was more like her. Pretty, popular, practical-minded, not bookish, or introverted. She did do better with my sister, who was a toddler and a child, showed her need for love and attention and interaction in ways I never could. It's very interesting that Kitty would turn to be quite social and be quite good in school, what your mother wished you were. And again, she even goes to explain how her relationship with her mother caused her and her sister to have very fogged up memories of what happened, and yet not once would she ever think that maybe her daughter can't identify why she has anorexia, because her memories are getting fogged also. My mother was an expert at this kind of emotionally abusive gaslighting, and she didn't do it only to me. When my sister was an adult living at home between college semesters, she worked for a time at Dunkin' Donuts. She developed a ritual of coming home after a late night shift and eating a bowl of ice cream while she watched TV. One night my sister opened the freezer, took out what looked like a new gallon of ice cream and lifted the lid. Inside the box, instead of ice cream, she found tightly packed garbage along with a note that said, "Gotcha." Our mother insisted it was just a prank, but 35 years later, my sister still remembered the shame she felt that night. This type of gaslighting can make you doubt memories as well as feelings. So not only is the intention of that prank something that got blurred but also their mom was like a food shamer also. See, there's so much to unpack there. And again, she does a good job of describing narcissistic abuse from a parent and how a kid feels very confused about what to do about it because they have a hard time validating their own feelings that they're being abused. The chasm between her father's words and his actions felt too familiar to me. I wanted to believe my mother when she insisted she loved me, but my body told me otherwise. I didn't feel loved by her. I wondered what was going on with me, that her words triggered a sense of dread and emptiness rather than warm, fuzzy feelings of reciprocated love. I wondered what was wrong with me, that I stuttered and fell silent when I tried to explain this to others. How can you question a parent's love when she talks about it all the time? How can you explain that despite the stream of words, you feel pummeled rather than nurtured? She can have all these feelings about her mother, but Kitty cannot have all these feelings about her despite so much of the behavior seeming to be reflected. Again, it's so sad that someone who studied journalism or professor of journalism and is so, like, such a high up and is such a well-esteemed writer just dropped the self-reflection. It's very interesting. In ways, it's like the scandal of Alice Munro. If you don't know, the Nobel Prize-winning writer who wrote about hardships and terrible things that women went through in a very sexist society. And then after she died, her estranged daughter, writes an essay saying, my mother, the famous writer, knew that my stepfather was doing things to me, and yet she chose to stay with him and chose him over me. And yet Alice Munro was someone who was no stranger to trying to dissect complex and sad issues affecting people, because that's what her stories were that made her so famous. Her book, Brave Girl Eating, came out in 2010. The mental health book blogging community picked up on it. There's a lot of old posts on it, and it has mostly favorable reviews, minus a few really bad reviews on Goodreads that came in the following years. The book blogging world was not what it is now, and it was that 2010 was the start of the very big self-help positive thinking movement, so what do you expect? I did find one later 2017 blog post that describes a lot of what I was thinking when I was reading it. Firstly, in her attempt to prove her family is not to blame for Kitty's anorexia, Harriet seems to never end up wanting to know the reason why Kitty developed an eating disorder in the first place. I understand knowing the cause could be hurtful for parents, but I believe it's not fair to not let Kitty explore that. I believe knowing why you developed an eating disorder, or any mental illness for that matter, is crucial in order for you to understand the way your brain, your illness work, and therefore crucial in order for you to recover. And like I said, in Shadow Daughter, the late Harriet's second book about her estrangement and just estrangement in general, she admitted Kitty relapsed, at 18. I guess, I guess Harriet's lucky she published that book when she did, because if it was now, I think it would be a very different story and sentiment about it.